Hello, welcome. My name is Cynthia Preston, and I'm an assistant professor here with University Libraries. So welcome to our program and thank you for coming. Before we start, I'd like the people at home who are watching this webinar to take note of the tips that we have up here on the screen. You can use chat for general comments. We will not be taking them. The panelists will not be taking them. And this presentation is being recorded for later viewing and will be posted. So let's begin. The three short films that you will see today are the result of many years of collaborative and community-led preservation and research. Since spring of 2020, OSU graduate students, Lydia Smith and Jacob Krupinski, have assisted the Renville Historic Preservation Society and the Ohio State Center for Folklore Studies in these efforts. Lydia Smith is a third-year MFA student in the Department of Art. Jacob Krupinski is a third-year PhD candidate in the Department of Musicology. They are both pursuing graduate interdisciplinary specializations in folklore. And they're recipients of the Global Arts and Humanities Small Grant Awards and 2021 Teams Fellowships. Before I introduce them and they start, I would like to say that my personal connection to Renville is that I married into the Renville family 47 years ago. So I have been traveling back and forth to Renville for 50 years. So that this program really works for me. So please welcome them as they introduce our panelists and their films.
Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? I guess Lydia, are you going to start?
Yes. Hi, I'm Lydia Smith, and this is Jake. And we're so glad that you're all here. Oh, sorry. Okay. Before we begin, we want to introduce our panelists who will answer questions after the films. Harry Ivory here is the chair of the Renville Historic Preservation Society, and Janice Ivory is a member of the Renville Historic Preservation Society. The Renville Historic Preservation Society is a nonprofit organization dedicated to leaving a legacy for future generations through the preservation of history, heritage, and the physical structures of the village of Renville. We've worked closely with them on this project over the past 2 years, and we're so excited to have them here at Ohio State.
I would like to introduce our final panelist, Alana Norwood. Alana is a researcher for Black in Appalachia, a nonprofit that works in collaboration with public media, residents, university departments, libraries, and archives and community organizations to highlight the history and contributions of African Americans in the development of the Mountain South and its culture. Alana is currently a visiting fellow at the OSU Center for Folklore Studies, where she is working with REHPS and OSU Folklore faculty and students to digitize the records of Joseph T. Williams, also known as Uncle Joe, a lifelong resident of Renville, and also served as the town clerk for many years.
Okay, so the first film that we have is Renville Across the Color Line, which was produced in 2018 by Burr Beard while he was completing his MFA at Ohio University. Drawing from historical research by Ivan Tribe and Franz Dobbins, the film contextualizes Renville's founding in 1879 as an integrated coal camp. It traces the life of Richard L. Davis to situate Renville's early history within the social, political, and economic context of the Hocking Hills coal fields in Southeast Appalachian, Ohio in the late 1800s. Oral history interviews with former residents connect this more distant history to experiences growing up in the town in the 1950s and 60s. So here we have our first film.
As Ohio transformed from an agrarian to an industrial state in the late 1800s, it became one of the largest coal-producing and coal-consuming states in the nation. In 1918, Ohio's coal workforce swelled to more than 50,000 miners. The number has plummeted over the last century to only 3,000 jobs in coal. Unique among the coal towns in southeast Ohio's little cities of the Black Diamonds is Renville. Renville is now the smallest incorporated town in Ohio, with 38 residents. At its peak in 1890, at over 850 residents, Renville was integrated with 38% of its population African American. Renville was founded in 1879 by William P. Rend, a Chicago industrialist who welcomed all races and nationalities to his town. Who was Rend, and what kind of a mine operator was he? And how did people get along in a racially integrated coal town in southeast Ohio? William Rend was one of the few mine owners who advocated for miners' rights. His Ohio Central Coal Company mines remained open during the Great Hocking Coal Strike of 1884 and 1885. There, Rend paid an equal wage to white and African American miners, and paid the highest tonnage rate of any southeast Ohio mine during the Great Strike. This equal blend of blacks and immigrant whites from as many as 7 different countries created a social experiment in racial integration in Renville.
Some historians have described it as a free space, which meant that it was more or less almost what nowadays maybe we would call a racial experiment, where African Americans and white miners lived side by side and worked side by side. So from that perspective, Renville was unique and different from any of the other mining communities around here.
Dr. Isaiah Tuppence became the company doctor at the mines in Renville, making him the first African American to receive a medical degree in Ohio. In 1886, Tuppence was elected mayor of Renville, making him the first African American mayor in the northern United States.
I was born in 1952 and I lived here for 12 years. I moved to Columbus and then came back during the summers. Moving to Columbus was like a culture shock to me. I was a little country boy, and living down here, I didn't experience any racism at all. Not at all. I didn't experience that till I got up to Columbus. Everybody was family. I mean, African Americans, white people, it didn't matter. Yes, my grandfather was a coal miner, but he was a big guy, and he was really quiet. He never really talked a lot. Doing the genealogy of the family, I've come across Renville had probably 7 to 8 labor unions here, and I've seen actually papers and books that have the list of names in it of all the people that were in those lodges, and my grandfather's name's in there. So,
among the early arriving miners to Renville was Adam Clayton Powell Sr. An admitted gambler, Powell found religion at a massive revival at the Renville Baptist Church, and went on to become the spiritual leader of the Harlem Renaissance, founder of the National Urban League, and pastor of Harlem's Abyssinian Baptist Church. Renville was first and foremost a mining community, and Richard L. Davis was the town's most famous miner.
Richard L. Davis came here when he was about 17 years old. He was a young man and started working in Ren's mines, ended up becoming a checkway man, and basically became involved in the politics of the labor movement, and was a very outspoken and courageous young person doing that. And then was enough involved in the mine labor movement that in 1890, when the United Mine Workers Organization was created in Columbus, Ohio, he was one of 2 African Americans at the convention of about 196 attendees. So he's very unique and very prominent. as far as the African American community is concerned. He was actually on the executive board of what was then called District 6, which was basically the state of Ohio. And he served there, like following the convention in Columbus, he was reelected 5 times in a row to serve on District 6, the executive board. And then in 1895, he actually ran for the National Executive Board, just missed it being elected, but then in the following year, in 1896, he ended up being elected on the National Executive Board, only to be re-elected the following year again. So he served a total of 2 years on the National Executive Board as the only African American.
Now, my grandfather, of course, he grew up in Chester Hill, and then he moved over here to Renville because of the coal mines. I remember him working in number 9 coal mine, which is between Renville and Corning. And he worked in a coal mine there for a few years. And I think he was in his 20s then. But he was one of the taller coal miners. So, you know, coal miners are usually short. He had to do a lot of bending over, and it wasn't good for his back. Myself, and growing up in Renville, I seemed like I was busy every day having fun doing something. And as far as going over, roaming all the hills around here, that was always fun to me, being outside. I started playing basketball, I was in the 5th grade. I remember playing with some of the older boys. The older fellas, they didn't have enough people to play basketball, so they got some of us younger ones. And they would tell us, you stand right here, we pass you the ball, you pass it back to us. So they gave me my spot, they would pass me the ball, and I would pass it back, but a lot of times I would shoot it, and got pretty good with it. So by the time I was in the 8th grade, I was a pretty good shooter.
Jerry Jackson's Renville team won the Perry County Championship when the Renville School had neither gymnasium nor basketball court. In the 1960s, Jerry was the Ohio Bobcats' leading scorer during 3 varsity years. He led the Bobcats to the NCAA Elite Eight in 1964 when he was ranked All-American. Jerry was drafted by the Detroit Pistons, but after an injury, went on to serve 2 years in the Army during the Vietnam War. Then he returned to OU to obtain a master's degree and was a middle school teacher for 37 years in Zanesville. Jerry Jackson was inducted into the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame in 2010. Renville School was built on the hill above the town in the 1880s. Racially integrated, it served students through the 8th grade.
I started at Renville in the 6th grade. There was one row of 7 of us. That was the 6th grade. And the middle row was the 7th grade. And the next row was the 8th grade. And we were all in one room, and there was just one teacher. And I had no idea how this was going to work. I look back at it, and I don't know how we got as much stuff in one day as we did. It was fine. One of the things, being a child in Renville, that I had the hardest thing doing was I couldn't understand why it was okay for me to interact with the white people. When I was in Columbus and I was growing up, we very seldom saw any. We were on the east side of Columbus, and that was it. You didn't go to any other part of town. At the time that we moved down here, Jimmy Jones was the mayor, and he was white. He had a daughter my age. Her name was Naomi, and she asked me to come and spend a night with her one day. I spent 3 days trying to get up enough nerve to ask my mother if I could do this because I knew that wasn't what, from my time in Columbus, that wasn't what you did. But I got to spend a night with her and I was a little shocked when my mother said, sure.
My great-grandparents, Henry and Lucy Winneberg, immigrated to America in the mid to late 1880s and followed other miners from Oberhausen, Germany to Renville. They came as shopkeepers rather than miners, but they were from the mining district in Germany. They operated several different stores there in the same structure, but we have stories and records showing it being a grocery store, a tavern, an ice cream parlor, lots of different things. So we don't know any sequence of that, but they obviously were in the business. In 1990, I met an elderly lady who grew up in Renville by the name of Ruth Sheldon, who remembered my grandparents' store from the teens. And I've met a couple elderly people who have vague memories of the store. So my family then in the 1920s moved to Corning, and that was the time that the Ku Klux Klan was very active in America. And they not only were after African Americans, but even more so in the Corning-Renville area, they were after German Catholics. It was right after World War I, and there was a lot of anti-German sentiment at that point in time. So it's pretty clear that my family and a number of the white families in Renville made the move to other communities to fit in more, and rather than being seen as different.
Richard L. Davis traveled across the Appalachian coal states to spread the gospel of the United Mine Workers Union. When he returned to Renville to work again as a miner, he was met with resistance.
98, I believe it is, he was blacklisted because of his union activities, and he wrote about how difficult it was for him to make a living and how his little children were basically, he was worried about how they would go hungry during the winter time.
He did work as a town constable when he died in 1900 at age 37. The demise of coal mining in Ohio parallels the demise of the UMWA, the struggle of blacks in the Union, their work in the mines, and the demise of Renville itself.
The turning point seems to be the what is called the Jacksonville Agreement, which was negotiated by John Lewis in 1927, which ended up resulting in higher pay for the miners, particularly in mechanized mines, and ended up being hurtful to smaller mine operations such as the ones here in Renville that were basically more still kind of with pickaxes rather than heavily mechanized mining.
So the Jacksonville Agreement was right on the eve of the Great Depression, and those two factors combined together really dropped the bottom out of the coal market in the Little Cities region. At the turn of the century, Corning was approximately a little bit over 50% in terms of home ownership by miners, and Renville was just a little under 50%. The coal operators in these communities believed that folks were better off if they owned their own property. unlike nearby communities like Congo and Santoy, which were strictly company-owned towns where everything was owned by the coal company. Even in Congo, they had a fence around the town to keep peddlers out and control the coming and going of the miners.
And everyone was new when they came to Renville. They were all looking to assimilate.
What happened in Renville was that the immigrants and the African Americans arrived at the same time, and they were all, in a sense, foreign to that place, and so they respected one another, there being newcomers, which kind of created this equal playing field where they learned to live together, and race and nationality weren't as big of a barrier as in other communities, creating this accidental experiment, social experiment.
Renville was incorporated in 1882, and the first celebration of Emancipation Day held in 1883 as a day for Thanksgiving. Emancipation Day continued in Renville through the 1950s. The event has been revived and is going strong annually on the Saturday closest to September 22nd since 2000, reestablished by the Renville Historical Preservation Society. The Renville Historical Preservation Society uses the Old Town Hall as its headquarters, and it hopes to restore a little white house on Main Street next door to Town Hall for a Renville museum. The Renville artworks use the space of the Old Baptist Church, moved across the railroad tracks and the now existing Route 13. The artworks is part of the Setchkar Company and provides services in Perry County, Ohio, to enrich the lives of people with varied abilities. Renville was a social experiment that, in a one-industry town, subject to the rise and fall of the coal industry, essentially worked, and positively affected the lives of Ohioans in stories from our past.
Thank you. Our next film, Stories of Decoration Day, was produced by us, me, Jacob Kaminsky, and Lydia Smith, and draws from our collaborative ethnographic work with the Renville Historic Preservation Society and the Ohio State University's Center for Folklore Studies. In March 2020, we spent a week with Harry Ivory, documenting the headstones in Renville Cemetery. During this week, we listened to Harry tell countless stories about the people buried in the cemetery and Renville's community. Harry's stories about visiting the cemetery led us to an oral history project centered on the communal practice of visiting on Decoration Day.
Observed throughout Appalachia, Decoration Day is an informal homecoming ritual in which communities gather to decorate local cemeteries in the days before Memorial Day. In Renville, Decoration Day was an important time for residents who had moved away to return and remember loved ones while celebrating their community. In our research, the cemetery is a shared space where many different memories and experiences of the town and community emerge. Our film uses oral history interviews layered over video footage we gathered while visiting the cemetery on Decoration Day in 2021 to provide an affective portrait of this experience.
Decoration Day, what I remember about it is the family getting together plus friends and going to the graveyard to put flowers on our relatives.
What I think about in terms of Decoration Day in general is, it's a day of recognizing, those who are deceased.
And also, while at the graveyard, seeing friends that we hadn't seen for a while, they brought their kids down.
Whole families.
Whole families would come down. You would usually see them at the graveyard also decorating their family members' tombstones or grave.
They sort of used it like a family reunion of sorts. It was a one-day event.
And so it was more of a homecoming, I guess you might say, in a sense, as well as a memorial. You could make a trip when somebody passes, but this was like a yearly thing that people did to remember these folks and to decorate their graves.
Decoration Day is probably, in my lifetime, has always been the busiest time of the year in the little towns of the little cities of Black Diamonds. My family ran a gift shop in the little town of Shawnee near Renville for about 25 years. And the week before Decoration Day or Memorial Day weekend, there'd be all these people come to town to decorate the graves. And I always also remember that every town had a Memorial Day celebration, or most towns had a Memorial Day celebration. And
it was always a big event. Because people would come that didn't live there. And it was always a festive celebration. We get people that we haven't seen in a year. They would come and they would decorate a graveyard and eat and drink and be merry, really,
It was mostly just the people that a lot of times it seemed like some people, if they were way away in Columbus, no, that used to seem farther, they might say, on purpose, we're going down there on Memorial Day. So then you would see people maybe that you didn't see any other time of the year.
Friends that I grew up with, family members had been buried in Renville. They would either come down from Columbus, mostly from Columbus, actually, and a few from Zanesville. I can remember the Scotts, the Blackwells, Kroners, Wilkses, all coming down from Columbus. As far as Zanesville, well, there was a Wooten and Burley's in Zanesville, and Workmans, a few workmen who had relatives that were buried in the cemetery there.
I have an aunt, Mary, who lived here in Cleveland, and she had an uncle, Theodore, who lived in Dayton. They would come, those who were in the Ohio area, pretty much everybody came to the cemetery for that specific purpose of beautifying and caring for the graves.
And a lot of people that used to live there moved to other states. And so the only time you would see them would be Memorial Day. So that was something that we look forward to seeing, was those people who moved not to Columbus, but to like Detroit and Chicago and Florida and places like that would come back on Memorial Day. That was one thing we really looked forward to see those people.
It was almost like Christmas, people were there. They was coming from all over, and we anticipated it and waited for it. It was just, excitement would build up, and
it was just a whole lot of fun. People you hadn't seen in a while, we got together and we just had a good talk and laugh. We ate, drinking with Mary. It was really nice.
First of all, it was around time for us to get out of school. And then we wouldn't go back until after Labor Day. So we had a long summer. Mm-hmm. So looking forward to that, Decoration Day, it reminds us of getting ready to be out of school for summer. So in our heads, we combine that together. We are out of school after decoration.
Well, as an adult, we would get up early in the morning to be there in Renville by at least 7:30.
When we first got married, I used to wonder, why do we have to get up so early to go down there? And then, you know, he told me, well, they shoot over the grave early. So then that's when we started going there real early. And it was almost like, it seemed like it always followed a very specific protocol.
I remember leaving Columbus, and what a long ride it seemed to be down Route 13 to Renville, and all of the little towns we went through, and the flags flying. Everybody had a flag out on their porch or on a pole. Just remember going through a lot of little towns and hitting the square, you know, and every city has a main street.
On the way to Renville, there was a flower shop, Marolt's Flower Shop. We always stopped there to pick up the flowers and take them on to Renville.
Everybody would hit the flower shops. And right up this road was Marolt's. Marolt's right there on Broadway. But anyway, that was everybody's breaking out, buying flowers for the graves, flowers for your house.
It wasn't just the cemetery that got decorated, it was the whole town.
Right.
It was the whole town that was decorated. Banners and flowers and just all kinds of decorations.
Once we got there, my mother would ride with us up to the cemetery. My sister would be there, and an aunt would also be there.
And then there was a certain time that we all had to be at the grave up in the cemetery. So we would all gather in cars and go up to the grave. And it was like a little processional of cars going up there, if there was more than one car.
And when we got there, that hill going up to the cemetery, going up the hill and rocking back and forth and getting up to the top of the hill. And I remember there was a man who lived up there. I guess he was the caretaker of the cemetery. And my aunt unloading the flats of flowers and then having to go and get buckets of water from the man who lived up there, and the planting and the watering and clearing away all of the overgrowth and whatnot that had accumulated over the winter months. And the cemetery was just full of people tending to graves, planting flowers, clearing things out.
But you would go, and each grave, Grandma used to have quite a list. And so somebody had to have the spade and dig a little hole and set the flowers in there, and clip around and tidy up. And
some people would put live flowers on it. We always put the artificial flowers. They last longer. We didn't have to tend to them.
What I remember most is the soldiers shooting over the graves. Well, the kids, we would get around and watch them line up, and then they would play taps. Somebody way off in the graveyard, you would never see them. They would hide down over the hill or somewhere and play taps.
Each year, because we had veterans up there, they would shoot over a veteran's grave. So there was always a different veteran each year.
You know, there were a lot of Prestons in the service back in that time. And after, at least 4 of the Preston boys would be dressed in their uniforms and shoot over the graves. Once they finished shooting, we kids would run up there and get the shells and keep those as souvenirs.
And so once they would leave, we kids would run and get the bullets. We couldn't wait to get the bullets.
And after all of the duties were taken care of at the cemeteries, then we would go down to, I think what was called the courthouse, and set the food up and eat. And everybody would sort of catch up on what had been going on.
You would make sure that you had some kind of little something prepared that they could sit down and eat. You know, if it's bacon and ham and make a potato salad and, you know, maybe baked beans and bacon and pie or something.
And like you said, there was dancing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They would bring in
They bring in the band.
bands and
There's food everywhere.
yeah, lots of food.
It was a very warm feeling, and it was a very family-oriented feeling. But in Renville, it's like in a small town like that, everybody knows each other. So it was a lot of people gathering, even if they weren't part of your immediate family, you still knew them. And so you would, you know, communicate with a whole bunch of folks. So it was a very different experience for me when I went to Renville on their Memorial Day.
And I think that when you see family who cares about family, you want that same thing to be in your household, that you duplicate the concern, the love, you duplicate the time, just time to ask questions, you know? Doesn't have to be a lot, a phone call or a card, just something to let someone else know I was thinking about you.
Well, you know, back as a kid, Decoration Day was watching the soldiers, getting the family together and doing things like that. But as a grown-up, I think it's more of honoring the soldiers who fought in the different wars, keeping the memory of our relatives alive, or however you want to say it, to make sure our kids knew their grandparents, great-grandparents, and what they were like.
Okay, I have my mother and my brother, family, friends, up on the hill at the graveyard. So, and you would go down there and you remember things you done together and you know, just missing them and everything. To me, it's more emotional. It's more of an inner feeling now than it's touching, really, you know.
To me, it's a chance for me to go down there, show them, you know, just be down there and show them the respect and
right
deserve.
And I think that's one thing you can say. Most of the people who came from Renville were proud of where they came from and the legacy that they left their children, and the fact that they wanted to be buried there says a lot. Take me back home. So those are the things that I would say stem from what I gleaned about my family and their relationship with their home.
Thank you. Our last film, Water for Life, is an example of how Renville's residents addressed water access in the late 1960s. Created as a project of RHPS by Michelle Cobbs, Burr Beard, and ourselves, Jake and Lydia again. This story is narrated through the voices of Alice White Harriston's family, a woman who had access to one of the only wells with water suitable for drinking during the 1960s. It also touches on how community organizers successfully advocated for a water main access to be extended to Renville, Ohio. Water access remains an important issue throughout Appalachia due to limited and deteriorating infrastructure, as well as the impact of acid mine drainage.
Renville is remembered for its many firsts,
including Isaiah Tuppence, the first African-American doctor in the state of Ohio, Sophia Mitchell, the first African-American woman mayor in the state of Ohio, and Roberta Preston, the first African-American woman postmaster in the United States. As we've talked to residents, we've heard of many stories that show how Renville's community was produced by many small acts of service and leadership. Water for Life represents just one of many stories to be told.
Dateline 1968, Renville, Ohio. This southern Perry County community with a population of 175 is faced with a serious water shortage. Only one well in the village has safe drinking water. This Appalachian region community finds its water source from rain collecting cisterns and a well behind the home of Alice White Harrison. Department records show that over the past several years, some 30 samples of water taken from 17 private wells and cisterns in the village have been reported as unsafe for human consumption because surface water contaminates the drinking water. Only one well is fit for drinking. It is owned by Alice White Harrison, who for the last 18 years has never refused anyone water for drinking purposes. Here is Mrs. White locking the pump over the well so the water would not be wasted.
You could use your water supply, what you had sometimes. If it wasn't really drinking quality, you could still boil it and wash dishes and wash clothing and things like that, you know, as long as you actually had some. But at certain points you need something, a better quality, you know, to drink.
This was Mrs. White's house, and her house was sort of the center of the town, and everybody seemed to congregate at her house. She would cook for the guy that was doing the preacher here. She would cook for him, and she was an awesome cook. She had a lot of grandkids here, and most of them were Blackwells. You know, the Blackwell family lived way back by the graveyard. And when they would come downtown, of course, they would be at Grandma White's house. She was a quiet woman. I mean, and she took care of her grandkids, and they mind whatever she said was the law, regardless. That was it. When Mrs. White talked, you listened.
I'm Nadine Blackwell.
Charlotte Blackwell.
When she died, she was Harrison, and they lived here till he died.
So her last name changed a few times.
Yeah.
It did, but everybody knew her as White.
What'd you call her?
Grandma.
Just Grandma?
And my kids who met her, I forget what the occasion was we were down here, but they were little. They were like 4 or 5, and they remember her as the grandmother that gave them a Musketeer bar.
Everything.
And they called her Grandma White.
Everybody loved her.
Yeah, I like my Grandma White a whole lot, cause she was just different, a whole lot different and everything. And she had love in her heart. It was that kind of love that just radiate out to you. Yeah, you could feel that love because she'd laugh a lot.
And my name's Michelle Cobbs, and my mother was Doris Murray, and I called her Grandma White, Great Grandma White. I remember coming in this house when I was a little girl. I just remember this lady that looked white, Grandma White. She looked white, and she had these black boots, shoe boots on, and I just remember feeling love. And I just looked forward to coming here to see my great grandma White.
And she had a well in the back, and a lot of people would go to that well to take to their home. She had the best well in this area downtown.
She had the only well downtown, here, and everybody came from everywhere with buckets
To get her
to
water.
get the water out of her well.
Yep.
One year I came here and somebody gave me an article about her well, and it was a write-up in the newspaper because her well had the only water that wasn't contaminated. And at that time, someone was going to Washington to lobby to get water.
Running water.
Yeah, so I have an article.
Finally got that water too.
As mentioned in the article, Jesse Roberts and Ruel Harris returned from Washington, D.C. Friday. Through the efforts of Congressman Clarence Miller, they were able to present the water problem of Renville to Joe Hansen, Assistant Administrator for Community Services, as well as to a top White House official.
Because everybody had wells and pumps, so it wasn't anything new. It was just like when the water came in, they went through the rocks. Because a lot of wells is just like a hole in the ground, and then you got like a couple rocks that, like sometimes like in our well at home, you'd find like snakes or animals or something in it. But hers had like rocks, so that kept out a lot of her well was constructed so that there was like big rocks all around the sides of it, so the water was filtered through the rocks.
Up on the hill, Lotus Alexander, that was his name. He had a well, but it wasn't like Grandma's. They had to draw water. It was a hoist, and then you would pull it up and put it in your dispensers and carry it home. That was an open well. Grandma's was not open. And with Grandma's, all they had to do was set that bucket down on that cement, pump it, fill it up, and then take it home.
I just remember the black pump.
Exactly, and you probably pumped the water, too.
Yes, and it took a few times before the water would come out.
Exactly, because it had to be pumped up to it.
Oh, she would have us go out and do it, or she would do it, or anyway. I mean, she would do it herself. I mean, because it was like one of the ones that just had the pump on it, and you just go out there and you prime it. And we thought it was great fun to go out there and pump water. We didn't know any. We didn't know any better. We just thought it was great fun, like pouring the water in, waiting, pumping, waiting for it to come up. She wouldn't let us play around the well. She was afraid people would fall in the well, so we had to be supervised. So she would have somebody look to make sure nobody got. Because you couldn't, because where the well is, it had like a little space, so you couldn't just go play on the well. So the only reason you would be around the well would be to like pump the water, and then you had to be supervised to pump the water.
Now, how was Grandma's in the winter? Did it freeze up or anything?
No, because it was so far down. Now, his well supplied the hill. Grandma's well supplied down what we called in town, that area. And and I loved going down Grandma's drinking from the well versus ours, them bringing it over from the open well. And everybody come to town loved that good water. Well was the focal point of everything.
But as a little boy, I lived across the street from her, and one of my jobs was to go over to the well and get water and bring it back to the house. Probably a couple gallons a day.
Was that the family's drinking and cooking water?
That's the drinking and cooking water. Yes, her water was very clean.
Drank it all the time, and it was cold.
And Aunt Nadine said it tastes better than the water y'all had up the hill.
Right.
I don't know. The water we had at our house had because we had a well at our house, and that always had a sort of metallic taste to it. But her water didn't.
Yeah, and it was just wonderful, good well water. That's how that went. Girl, it was something else, but we all loved going to Grandma's drinking. And the bad thing was everybody drank out that dipper. Grandma had a dipper. You could just pump it and get that dipper full and step back and just drink the water. And then after we run water on it, we'll take our sleeve and wipe the dipper. And sleeves was probably dirty, but
Yep.
that's what we did. Take your sleeve and wipe that dipper off.
Yes, yes.
I mean, after church, we'd be thirsty. We'd go run over there, or whenever we go visit her, fill up a bucket. Then you would take the bucket into her kitchen, and she had it sitting there and had a dipper there. So when people came in, everybody drank from the same dipper. We didn't have glasses. Everybody drank from the same dipper. She was giving water to other people. They must have carried it off in something else. But for her use, and like when we went over there, there was always a bucket of water sitting in her kitchen. It was not cold. It was just a bucket of water. But it tasted, that was the best tasting water because it was, on a hot day with no air conditioning, it was a good drink of water. When people came back to Renville, like on, like when they would have stuff like a church anniversary or stuff like that, and there'd be a lot of people, coming back in. This was before they actually got water in Renville. But there'd be a lot of people coming in, and so, her house would be a stop because they would have to quench their thirst. They would get cups. She wouldn't let them drink out of the dipper that little bit. I mean, they would get little cups and stuff of water before they visited with everybody, and then they go back to wherever they came from. And to me, you know what? It was just water. It wasn't anything. I mean, I didn't tie any significance to, and I didn't see people come and get the water. That was probably before my time. To me, it was just water. And again, it's just took it for granted.
According to Miss Jean Harris, a resident of Renville, it seemed like some springs were altered after the mining. Some became unpalatable and some dried up. Sulfur was evident in many wells and streams.
You can see there is nothing living in this water at all. It's really just not compatible with life.
Rural Action serves as a leader in stream restoration throughout Ohio's coal region, with staff working in partnership with communities to provide watershed management services, including water quality monitoring, watershed planning and review, restoration and protection project management, and community organizing around water resources, helping to ensure access to clean water across the region and into the future.
After many years of struggle by advocates and residents of Renville to get water to the village, Renville finally got water in 1972. There was a dedication written about in an article in the Athens Messenger, where Representative Clarence Miller was invited. And then in 1978, other communities in Perry County finally would have water piped into their homes.
This little small town is rich in history. I mean, it's good to know where you came from so you can figure out where you're going. The famous people that came here, they worked hard and they made it and they advanced. You take Adam Clayton Powell, Isaiah Tuppence, the first black physician to graduate from Ohio State, did his practice here in Renville. So, there were a lot of famous people here. We want to keep their stories alive. We want their children, their grandchildren to know what Renville was all about and how well the people got along with each other.
Well, and see, I'm not sure if it would be so different than anybody else that lived there, because probably everybody had that same sense of neighborliness. It probably just wasn't her. It probably was just like everybody in the neighborhood. Miss Bailey on the other side of her, I'm sure people went there. Miss Hall and stuff like that. I'm sure people went there. I don't think it was unique to Miss Alice. That's the way it was.
When the house is done, I think it's important that there be maybe little bottles of water in here to give away, or, people to donate funds to or something. And I think about the story of Renville and how the residents struggled to get water. and how my great grandmother freely gave water from her well for so many years, it makes me think about the story in the Bible of the woman at the well. There's a verse that says, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." I believe my grandmother had that living water inside of her, which is what allowed her to give to others water for life from her well.
Like the woman at the well, I was seeking for things that could not satisfy. And then I heard my Savior speaking, "Draw from my well that never shall run dry. Fill my cup, Lord, I lift it up, Lord. Come and quench this thirsting of my soul. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Fill my cup, fill it up and make me whole." There are millions in this world who are craving the pleasures earthly things afford, but none can match the wondrous treasure that I find in Jesus Christ my Lord. Fill my cup, Lord, I lift it up, Lord. Come and quench this thirsting in my soul. Oh, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Fill my cup, fill it up and make me whole. So my brother, if the things this world gave you leaves
Thank you. Now we invite Harry, Alana, and Janice to come up. And we're going to take a few seconds to just kind of maybe breathe, and we'll start our Q&A session here in maybe a minute or two. All right, so actually, can we just have all of you say your names into the microphone so that we can make sure that we hear you nice and clear? So you might need to pull it. Yep, there you go.
Harry Ivory.
Yep, from our tech people, can we hear that? Yeah, do it again, Harry.
Harry Ivory.
Sorry, we have a couple, just technical difficulties.
Harry Ivory.
Alana Norwood. Janice Ivory.
Yep, Lita, are you hearing that through the microphone okay?
It sounds in background.
Okay. Okay, we'll take a second to just work on the tech things, maybe. So maybe what we can do, since this mic is working, we'll pass it around and we can just go like that. So we're going to start with one question for everybody to respond to, and then we'll open up to questions in the room. And I think for the sake of everyone being able to hear on Zoom, I will bring the mic out to you and you can state your question and then we'll have it go to the panelists. So maybe the mics are working now. So our first question to everyone is, what do the stories and histories in the videos mean to you? And what can we learn from them? So again, maybe you could just introduce yourself and say how you're related to or involved in Renville, and then just speak a little bit about what the stories in the videos mean to you.
I'm Harry Ivory, and I was born and raised in Renville. The videos, to me, I wasn't aware of a lot of stuff that was going on in Renville until I saw these videos. I was young when I lived there, and just the things that was going on, I had no idea.
Hey everybody, I'm Alana Norwood. I'm a community archivist with nonprofit Black in Appalachia. My connection to the Renville community is directly tied to my work. So my boss was like, hey, we're gonna go on a road trip to this little town in northeastern or southeastern Ohio. And I was like, all right, cool, I love a road trip, sign me up. And long story short, we formed a really good working relationship with Harry and Janice, and ultimately, I've been collaborating now with OSU and the Folklore Studies Center and the Renville Historical Preservation Society to digitize the, I call it Uncle Joe collection. I feel like he's my uncle now, but it's officially the Joseph T. Williams collection. It's been amazing to, I've been mostly digitizing primary sources. So it looks like handwritten letters and cursive and stuff to people. So it's been really, really powerful. And so my biggest takeaway and what I think people can learn from this collection and from Renville is it was highlighted in the videos, right? Like, this is somebody's history. These are people's legacies. And I think ultimately this is what's going to keep Renville alive even whenever it's no longer incorporated. It's 0 people in the town. Renville will continue to live on. And I think videos like this and the really cool letters and all of the documents that we're putting together collaboratively will it will continue the legacy and make the people from Renville and the descendants from Renville to have something to be proud about. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. I'm Janice Ivory. What I've learned a lot about Renville just through the research, because you don't really see the history as you're making it. I wasn't born in Renville, but I spent my growing up years in Renville. My mother was born and raised in Renville, and I still have family there. What I've taken away from this whole process, which is amazing to me every day that we do things, to see all of these people who are here, to know that all of you are interested in this. This is just amazing to me that it's here. My biggest takeaway is we all have a history, and it's important to us and to the people who come after us that we document our history. I hate to see people throw away a letter, a birthday card, a
there's something there that is important for your people who come after you to know. And that's the biggest thing for me to take away from this, not just to leave a history of Renville, but to leave a history. It can't just go away. It has to be there. Renville is really unique. It's different than most of the world has been, but it's because it was new. We can continue to be new. We need to continue to be new, but we can't continue to be great if we don't know what greatness is. And I think we pulled that greatness out of Renville to as the building blocks that we need to continue.
Okay, well, we have a couple more questions prepared, but also should we do that and then move to open?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. So as this is mostly for Carrie and Janice. As two people who have grown up, well, you've kind of already answered this. You were really just interested in how your relationship has evolved since you started doing the work, and maybe Carrie, you'd be interested in talking a little bit about cemetery and some of the work that you've done there together. Interested, or also.
Growing up in Renville was fun. I mean, that it was different. I had a good time running around the hills, just enjoying myself. I was young. I was probably 7, 8 years old. Yeah, it was really fun. But working up at the cemetery with Jake and Lydia, that was really exciting. We documented the graves. We just did all kinds of pictures, photographs, and it was great.
Yeah, so the question was, growing up given that you grew up in Renville, can you maybe talk about some specific things that you've learned through the process of doing all this work and what that means to you?
This goes very eloquently.
Yeah. The question, the more I think about the question, the bigger it gets. There is so much that I have learned about the whole process. And it's not just the process of, not just what's coming out of Renville, but what's coming out of Southeast Ohio. Renville as a small community in Southeast Ohio is like a neighborhood. And we all are so interrelated, and it's becoming more and more recognizable out there that we all are a part of the same community down there. Not just the African American part of it, but the whole, we're all, it's like we're all in it.
Yeah, and this next question is kind of deviating from the films a little bit, but it's more to Harry and Alana about your experience working with the current project, digitizing the Uncle Joe archives, just things that stand out to you and what you find interesting about that, or what these kinds of home collections, personal collections, can tell us about the history of Renville, but also maybe other places like Renville.
Probably once working with the archiving it's really been enlightening to me. I had, going through these letters and it's really, I had no idea about what was going on in Renville, as far as our families go, and just the different types of letters. And it's important to get this archiving done. And what that will do is preserve the history of Renville.
As a community archivist for Black in Appalachia, working with this massive amount of like primary resources was mind blowing. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for trusting me with it. It feels like a big deal. Like these are very sentimental, personal items, so it feels big to directly be touching something from 1901 or 1910. Like, these are 100-year documents. So. Thanks. Secondly, I think just seeing how parallel like social human behavior is still today, like in 2022, as it was in 1901, that blows my mind as well. And there's been so many times where I'm reading a letter and it'll be like, and you better write me back as soon as possible. Like, I don't want to wait 2 months to hear from you again. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, so people were ghosting each other via letter, right? Like, and where somebody will be like, there'll be like a little flirty in the letter, like it won't be like family to family, because Uncle Joe was like a scribe for the townspeople. And so it'll be like a little flirty letter to like a lover, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see y'all, like, you got some love things going on, some flings, like, people just doing normal people stuff. And like, to me as a young person, I'm like, 1901, I can't even imagine what life was like back then. But people still were feeling the same things. And so I think that's been really cool, like seeing those social interactions. But then also on the flip side, like things were really different. So people would write letters and be like, oh, hey, I'm gonna send you these basil seeds, like via mail, or I'm gonna send you a Thanksgiving dinner via like refrigerated train. Like, nobody would like send me a pie in the mail. Maybe if I ate it at HelloFresh, right? But like not a family member. So like those nuances are really cool to see. And so whenever we figure out what we're gonna do with the collection, please go check it out because it is really awesome.
I would like to share, because of the letters, the whole archive process, working with OSU and the folklore people and Lydia and Jake with the cemetery. They started me on a project that is indirectly connected to Renville. When we were doing the Memorial Day project, one of the things we asked was for people to look on the website where we had listed all of the names of everyone who had stuff in the cemetery. Pick out someone and research them, and then we had a Zoom meeting where we asked people to share with us the stories that people. One of the ladies from the Folklore Center picked someone and told her story. She and I picked the first same person. As it turned out, she picked my great-grandmother. So we both had an opportunity to tell my great-grandmother's story from two different directions. It really touched me that she did that, listening to the way she told the story, sent me back to look at my great-grandmother's information all over again. And so I'm doing it differently for my family. I am writing my great-grandmother's story. I would like to share one of her stories with you. Just so I understand what she's saying. I want you to understand how much this touched me. I read a letter that was written by my great grandmother. It was in her handwriting. This was a lady who only went to the 4th grade, but she could read and she could write, and she wrote a story. She didn't write a story, she wrote a letter. She wrote a letter to the War Department where she was asking for a widow's pension because her husband had fought in the Civil War. And she felt like she and her 5 kids deserved to have a pension for them. She wrote the reason that she felt this was because she had participated in the Civil War. The soldiers came to her house. She and her mother fed them. She filled their canteens with water and sent them on their way. As they were leaving, they thanked her and told her that they thought they were about to die for starvation until she fed them. In her handwriting, her letter, we know it was her letter. It was stamped with, it has the government stamp. They denied her pension and sent the letter back to her. But to have that, actually have that in my hand, to be able to say, my great grandmother did this. I don't think that's something that, I don't, to me, that is something that is so unique. I don't think it could happen, and it's not just the people with Grenville. I would like to encourage everybody, don't bury your letters. You never know how it's going to affect your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. You know, one of the pictures in the videos up here was a picture of my great grandmother. You know, and to know every time I see a picture, you know, I think about that story. She actually participated in the Civil War. That's the kind of thing that I'm taking away from what we're doing with Grenville, and part of the reason that I'm continuing to do this. And I would just like for everybody to do this whole thing. There's a family here in this room that has their family document, and I encourage them so much. Heather, I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's what I think. I think Cynthia has a couple questions, or maybe other people have questions from the audience. Thank you, Janice. I think the question. The battery ran out. Is your microphone working? Thank you.
Thank you so much for presenting this today. It was very emotional, and I've talked with Cindy Preston about this many times. It's a small world, because my grandmother, you know, all these stories just resonate so much in history. You don't know how, like you said, you're attached to history. My grandmother and my aunt, her sister, used to every year go to the Christmas gathering at the Christopher Inn with the Windmill Club. So my question is, like, I was really young, but we went every year. It was such a wonderful event and family. But at that time, because I was so young, I don't remember, you know, how are we connected? You know, so I just want to know if you know more about the Windmill Club and how that connection got to Columbus.
We have about like 5 or 6 minutes, so.
The Windmill Club was a group of people in Columbus who were from Grenville. They got together like once a month or so they kept in touch. Once a year, they would have a picnic in Grenville. Greenville, well, that was sort of like a reunion thing, but it was a way of keeping in touch with other people from Greenville. Not just to keep in touch, they were sort of supportive for each other. They helped when people from Greenville came to Columbus. They helped them find jobs, they helped them find someplace to live, they gave them all that they were taken care of. It was just an extension of family from Greenville.
Quickly, that sentiment is very evident in the letters. I mean, every other letter, it was like, hey, I need some help, like, could you do it? If not, like, I get it. Or it would be like, oh, hey, yeah, I just sent you some money, like, be sure to go pick it up, thanks for helping last time. So, whether it was an official gathering or just like this inter-community, face-to-face or letter-to-letter, that was something that happened pretty frequently.
Do you have other questions?
Hi, yes, I have a comment. My name is Michelle Collins, and first of all, Greenville Historic Preservation Society, I just thank them for helping to fund that video, especially the one, all the videos, especially the water video. The title of this presentation is Leadership Legacy, Black Appalachian Leadership Legacy in Life in Greenville. I didn't realize my heritage is Appalachian. So one of the things that I learned is I'm descended from Black Appalachians. So I would encourage people to research their history, their identity, wherever you come from. Even if you're European, where's your heritage, what village? So I think that's very, very important. Identity is very important. And yeah, thank you guys.
Yep, I think we're kind of to our last thing, so maybe for closing comments, maybe just in a sentence or two, what is maybe like some other projects that you think are important to do in Grenville, or just even in Southeast Ohio more generally, so.
So for me, I would be amiss if I did not shamelessly plug my organization. Black in Appalachia, we're a really cool nonprofit organization. We're really trying to build our workforce and the labor that we have. Particularly, we are looking for a younger person to kind of take charge and participate in the digitization and the preservation of the Greenville history. It would be preferable if they had direct ties to the community or family of community members. But if this is something that you're interested in, and like these videos and this presentation has made you feel something, please, please, please reach out to us. It can start off as volunteer, but like grants and money can be pushed your way. So please reach out. Sorry.
One quick thing.
It's like a plug. One good thing we're working to make sure that we have a brick and mortar place in Greenville that we can store and archive this stuff that we're doing here. It's something that's in the works. We've been working on it for a while. We're still working on it.
Thank you. Now, Cynthia, we are going to take it from here.
Hello, I'd like to introduce Lita Hendricks. Was like to discuss something, tell you something.
Thank you for that great introduction. The Black Appalachia and Greenville, Ohio display cases are located in front of Thompson Library Room 160. For folks who are attending this event, just go out to your right and you'll see the two cases. And the display content features books for Black Appalachia research, historic images of Greenville, Ohio, and a Preston family treasure, a Greenville, Ohio commemorative plate So you just gotta go see the display just to see that plate. Many thanks to Justin Luna for his guidance in display craft. Much thanks to Professor Cynthia Preston, chief organizer of this event and related activities. Her work and the work of this panel have shined a light on the hidden histories of Black Appalachia in Renville, Ohio.
Once again, thank you all for coming. I know some people travel here from other towns to be here with this event. We really appreciate it. I would like to second what one lady said in one of the films. When I first started making that trip from Columbus, Ohio to Renville in the 70s, I thought that was the longest trip. Over the years, though, it's just gotten much shorter. So I just want to thank everyone and everyone who contributed. And these two students, Jacob and Lydia, are fantastic. I'm still looking forward from them in the future.